The U.S. men's national team has turned into an episode of The Real Housewives, and at the end of this story, the final 24 hours of it will be the unraveling of basically the entire sanctity of the U.S. national team setup. But the story starts in New Jersey, because of course it starts in New Jersey. Why is it always New Jersey? Because that is where these two guys grew up together. On the left, U.S. national team captain, former U.S. national team captain Gio Reyna, and on the right, Gregg Berhalter, who is the current coach of the U.S. national team. Kind of, sort of. Kind of. Here's them growing up in New Jersey in the 80s, and they both played high school soccer at St. Benedict's Prep, and then they both went to ACC schools, which two schools, universities in the same conference, so they're basically in the same league, playing each other all the time, still around each other. Gio went to the University of Virginia, which entirely unrelated. Go Who's, that's where I went. And Gregg Berhalter went to the University of North Carolina. This is important because that's where he intersected with the other half of this story. And that would be Rosalind Santana and Danielle Egan, who, of course, also grew up together in Long Island this time. It's like the other side of New York, they're on either side of it. They played junior league together, and then they both ended up attending the University of North Carolina, where they were both roommates and teammates for all 4 years. And hold on, I know you're thinking, how in the world are we going to get to the downfall of U.S. soccer from two groups of people growing up together? We're already well on the way here. Because at the University of North Carolina, Danielle and Rosalind meet this handsome hunk of man. That's Gregg Berhalter, with hair. He was playing center back on the North Carolina team. Rosalind and Gregg take a fancy to each other, and then some short time later, Gio and Danielle Egan take a fancy to each other. And fast forward to them getting married, both of them. At which point, Gregg Berhalter is the best man at Gio Reyna's wedding. Looks like the lead singer of Nickelback. Gregg Berhalter and Gio Reyna both go on to successful European careers. They both start playing for the U.S. national team, and Gio Reyna eventually captains the U.S. national team. Very successful players. And they're both married. They both start having kids. Gregg has a kid named Sebastian, and Gio and Danielle have a kid named Gio Reyna. And the families spend a lot of time around each other. That's a picture of Gregg Berhalter and Gio Reyna when he's like young. The two stay involved in the sport. Gregg Berhalter becomes a coach, eventually the coach of the U.S. national team, and Gio Reyna becomes a director, where he is now the director of Austin FC in the MLS. This brings us to the World Cup that just happened like a month ago, where a whole bunch of drama sparks up between Gregg Berhalter and Gio Reyna. The spark notes as Gregg goes to him before the tournament, says he's not going to play much. Gio Reyna throws a bit of a fit, almost gets sent home because he's not trying in practice, and then is forced to apologize to the team, and that's kind of the end of it. And it was supposed to stay in-house. Berhalter kind of messed that up. He sits down, gives a talk, all of this becomes super public knowledge, and everybody's going after Reyna. And that's kind of the end of the story. Until January 3rd. This is the beginning of the 24 hours that just obliterate U.S. soccer. They announced an investigation into Gregg Berhalter for assault, although that's not immediately apparent from U.S. soccer's statement. They just say upon learning of the allegations against U.S. national head coach Gregg Berhalter, they immediately hired a law firm to do an independent investigation. They also say, rather weirdly, that they learned about potential inappropriate behavior towards multiple members of our staff by individuals outside of our organization, and that they take such behavior seriously. We have no context. They also go on to say Gregg and Rosalind have come forward to speak openly about the incident. Now, what incident, you might be wondering? Well, Gregg released a statement at the exact same time. And it brings us all the way back to North Carolina in 1991, the University of North Carolina, where they met. After they'd been dating for 4 months, one night, while out drinking at a local bar, Rosalind and I had a heated argument that continued outside. It became physical, and I kicked her in the legs. And to summarize what happened after that, they didn't talk for 7 months. He apologized profusely to his family, her family, everybody else, sought counseling independently. They eventually got back together, and they've been married for 25 years. He also echoes the same sketchy, weird stuff that the U.S. statement did. It was during the World Cup, an individual contacted U.S. Soccer saying that they had information about me that would take me down. What? Like, that's insane. This is shady, insane, sports undercover documentary sort of stuff that he's just willy-nilly throwing out right before talking about how he kinda, sorta, definitely assaulted his future wife like 32 years ago, and then they worked through it through counseling and like a million conversations with each other's families, which is painful for both of them to have to relive in a public way if they were able to deal with this privately. And they're definitely not too happy they had to do that, I would imagine. It's also worth mentioning, if I want to build you a timeline here, and the World Cup happens here, Berhalter's contract runs out on the 31st. It's ended. And they're deciding whether to offer him a new contract, and this happens and comes out as public 3 days later. The investigation started on the 11th. That's only 8 days after they lost to the Netherlands to get eliminated. Berhalter's statement's a lot longer. I'll honestly link it at the top of this description, but it's only a small piece of what's actually ripping US soccer to shreds. Because as people very quickly jumped on, it wasn't the altercation that Gregg Berhalter and his future wife Rosalind had 31 years ago. It was the blackmail. Alexi Lalas, who could best be described as a sentient American flag, said evidently someone blackmailed our U.S. national team coach during the World Cup about an incident that happened. American soccer, we eat our own. Taylor Twellman took a slightly different approach to it, but echoed basically what I felt about it, that this should not be something that was being addressed publicly, if they've been working through this privately for 30 years. And Nico Cantor also talked about how the Berhalter going public first meant that he kind of looked like he had nothing to hide and was addressing these allegations up front, but he's also making this investigated allegation seem like blackmail, and even puts allegation in quotes, parentheses, quotes. And then on the same day, because this is all within 24 hours, a few leaks start to appear that we're not done with this story, which did appear cut and dry if you ignored the blackmail part. Heath Pierce, for example, says he hears the drama's about to really unfold tomorrow. Patrick Lloyd said, Heath, this tweet aged better than any I've ever seen. Good lord. Then there's Brooke Tunstall, who got even closer. Not for nothing, but Gio Reyna's mom was Roz Berhalter's teammate and roommate at UNC. She'd almost certainly have known about the kicking incident. Just saying, 10 points for Brooke Tunstall, because Brooke Tunstall was right. Then the next day, this headline pops up on ESPN. Danielle Reyna, that's formerly Danielle Egan, who grew up on Long Island with Rosalind, went to school with her for 4 years, married Claudio Reyna. The best man at that wedding was Gregg Berhalter. The mom of Gio Reyna is the one that told US Soccer about that past domestic violence incident for Gregg Berhalter. Are you kidding me? This immediately pins those blackmail allegations not on some random investigative journalist or muckraking type of person that's trying to mess with the U.S. national team or hates Berhalter. This pins it on the Berhalter's greatest family friend and one of the other royal families of U.S. soccer. Like, pin the tail on the donkey. On the Reynas. Now, Danielle Reyna immediately releases a statement and says, at the time I called Ernie, many people were trashing Gio on social media due to Gregg's comments. This is when he accidentally, or maybe on purpose, aired the fact that Gio was almost kicked off the team in Qatar. And I didn't know when or if this would stop. I just wanted Ernie to help make sure that there would be no further unwarranted attacks on my son. I thought our conversation would remain in confidence, and it didn't occur to me that at the time that anything I said could lead to investigation. I'm not criticizing Ernie here. Now, you'll notice I haven't told you who Ernie is yet. She didn't just call anybody. Ernie is Ernie Stewart, the sporting director of the U.S. Soccer Federation, and the man that hired Gregg Berhalter to be the head coach of the national team, which is insane. Oh, it's going to remain in confidence. Of course, he's not going to do... How? You're talking to the person who is Gregg Berhalter's boss about how frustrated you are that he's not playing your son. How does Gregg Berhalter kicking his future wife in the shins 31 years ago come out in a conversation about how Gio Reyna's getting trashed on social media? There's no line there. You need 8 miles of string to make that line on a thought web. It doesn't make sense. There's no line. None. Unless you are trying to trash Gregg Berhalter, which she is clearly trying to do. And there is no way you can argue your way around that. You are trying to protect your son. That's awesome. I have at least 5 people call me awful things every day. It's the internet. I wish it wasn't that way. I really do. Your son is a professional soccer player at a super, super high level. That sort of thing is going to happen, and you don't call the sporting director of the U.S. Federation and just riff on all the things that are wrong with the coach and air out one of your best friends, at least somebody who used to be your best friend, your roommate for 4 years at UNC. You just aired one of her most private things. This is crazy. So she wants to be very clear, I didn't ask for Gregg to be fired. This is like a classic soccer mom move. By the way, I saw Timmy out by the dumpster yesterday. Like, that's what this is. So she did not make any threats or didn't know anything about blackmail attempts. She didn't use any of those words. I'm absolutely certain, but she is not upset that this is being investigated. And Gregg clearly knows that they did this on purpose because Gregg said it. An individual contacted US Soccer saying they had the information about me that would take me down. This matriculated to him. I don't think the Reynas told him, but maybe they did. Danielle and Rosalind happened to have a conversation, and Danielle went, by the way, had a conversation with our buddy Ernie yesterday. There's other parts of the statement where she says, I've known Ernie for years and consider him a close friend. I wanted to let him know that I was absolutely outraged and devastated that Gio had been put in such a terrible position, that I felt very personally betrayed by the actions of someone my family had considered a friend for decades. Oh, this is so juicy. And she also actually tells you how you take that 8 miles of string and connect these two things. What she said, she told Ernie Stewart, is that I thought it was especially unfair that Gio, who had apologized for acting immaturely about his playing time, was still being dragged through the mud when Gregg had asked for and received forgiveness for doing something so much worse at the same age. She tried to add some more gas to the fire that the Berhalters had seemingly already put out. She says that without going into detail, the statements from yesterday significantly minimized the abuse on the night in question. She's saying Berhalter just straight up lied about what happened, and Rosalind still hasn't come public, so Berhalter's statement's the only thing we have. She says Rosalind Berhalter was my roommate, teammate, and best friend. Key emphasis on was. I supported her through the trauma that followed. It took a long time for me to forgive and accept Gregg afterward. I'm gonna lay it on you right now. You never did. I'm going really hard at Danielle just because she's playing dumb like she didn't know what was happening. I don't necessarily think Danielle is in the wrong, but you knew about this when he was hired 3 years ago, and it only came out after your son was getting trashed on social media and didn't play. So if it was really that bad, she rounds it out with, I would have expected him to give the same grace to Gio that she kind of gave to him. That's not how the national team works. That's not how any of this works. Of course, Claudia Reyna is involved in this because freaking Gregg Berhalter was Claudia Reyna, that woman's husband's best man at the wedding where they got married. Claudia Reyna said, I support my wife Danielle in her statement. I too was upset by Gregg's comments about Gio after the US was out of the World Cup, and he says he also appealed. What? I also appealed to good old Ernie on December 11th, asking him to prevent any additional comments. What is Ernie supposed to do? Muzzle the head coach of the U.S. national team because Claudia Reyna says his son's feelings are hurt? Claudia Reyna has no position, none. Or Danielle Reyna. They have no position in the U.S. national team. They're just friends with Ernie Stewart. This is ridiculous. It boggles the mind. Like, Ricardo Pepi was left off the whole freaking World Cup team, and he was so mad he hung up the phone on Gregg Berhalter. And Ricardo Pepi's mom's not calling up executives at US Soccer like, this is ridiculous. But it is worth mentioning, as David Kilpatrick on Twitter points out, that as the sporting director at Austin FC, Claudia Reyna actually took Sebastian Berhalter. Remember I mentioned him earlier? Took him on loan and didn't exercise the option to buy and just sent him back to the Columbus Crew. So maybe that's when it all started. That's when the breakdown between the Berhalters and the Reynas started, which is, it just made us look stupid, right? It's made the whole US Federation look stupid. But there's a couple of points here. One, if the abuse on that night was much worse than Gregg said, as Danielle Reyna suggests, then Berhalter's not even under contract. Just toss him out the window and get rid of him, right? The second part is this is just embarrassing to say this, but you have to find a way to insulate the structure of the US Federation from angry soccer moms. Now, I know that angry soccer moms are predatory beings. How the parent of a player, and Claudio did this too, can try and lean on the sporting director to take the pressure off of their son because they feel that their son is being unjustly vilified. That's insane. I don't know how Ernie Stewart still has a job, needs to clean it up because this is unbelievable. It's actually unbelievable in the true meaning of that word. And the third part is Gio Reyna, who I feel bad for because he's now left in an apologist position for the insanity of his parents, which sucks. He must have felt like once he started playing for Dortmund, those days were over, but And the other point is I feel terrible for Rosalind, whether it was just a kick to the shins or much worse, she's having to relive this trauma that she worked through to then marry the guy for 25 years, and that is super uncomfortable. But I do thank the Berhalters and the Reynas for exposing the fact that the U.S. Soccer Federation, despite all of its alleged improvement, is still an incestuous pile of man babies, incapable of figuring out anything. Anything.